What's up, y'all, and welcome to the Geography of Industry and Services, Part 2. In this video, we're going to look at changes in industrial production, asking this essential question: how did the geography of production change up to the mid-20th century? This cartogram shows you the relative global wealth in 1900 as measured by gross domestic product. Clearly, you can see the immense wealth of Western and Northern Europe compared to all other regions. They experienced a first-mover advantage, due to being the first states to engage in massive industrialization. However, soon after Britain had begun the First Industrial Revolution, and even while it was diffusing to other areas of Europe, secondary hearths emerged as well. The United States started industrializing before the end of the 18th century, bolstered by vast natural resources and cheap labor reinforced through massive immigration. Other secondary hearths cropped up in Russia and especially what is modern-day Ukraine. And by the middle of the 19th century, Japan engaged in its own industrial revolution, the first state to do so on the Asian continent. By the time 1870 rolled around, the calculated work done through steam power exceeded that done by animal and human power combined, indicating a significant shift in production and productivity. This marked the start of the Second Industrial Revolution, sometimes called the Technological Revolution, the Age of Synergy, that spanned from 1870 to the start of World War I in 1914. Now, synergy refers to the cumulative benefits of working together, essentially meaning the creation of something that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that synergy came about as a result of a multitude of technologies, such as the proliferation of electric power, which predated this era but became more ubiquitous with the expansion of alternating current, which is what powers the vast majority of global electric grids, since its energy dissipates less over distance as compared with direct current. Through electric power, major improvements in communication technology were invented, first with the telegraph, which predated the Second Industrial Revolution. But communication was improved even further later on with the invention of the telephone and then the radio. This led to what has sometimes been referred to as the annihilation of distance. In reality, distance still mattered, as it certainly still does today, but it mattered less, enabling people to connect and work together in synergistic ways that were not possible before. Other technological inventions predated this era, but came into fruition during the Second Industrial Revolution. For instance, inventions that greatly aided the growth of urbanization. The Bessemer process made steel much stronger through a technique of forcing air into molten iron to burn off impurities. Combine the improved steel with passenger elevators, and you can then have skyscrapers. I mean, think about the annoyance of walking up just a few flights of stairs. The incandescent light bulb, invented by none other than Thomas Edison, lit up the world, making it possible to illuminate entire cities and homes. And it was much safer than using oil lamps. The means of transportation improved substantially as well, reducing distance decay with the introduction of automobiles and road systems by the late 19th century, and with the invention of powered flight by the start of the 20th century. By the 1800s, modern mass production began replacing skilled workers and craftsmen with legions of unskilled workers assembled in factories. Mass production requires three elements: division of labor, which had existed since the dawn of man. Just think of the term hunters and gatherers. As the name states, they divided their labor amongst themselves. You also need interchangeable parts, which didn't become massively used until the 1800s. And lastly, the assembly line is needed, in which machines and unskilled workers can perform relatively simple and repetitive tasks with minimal movement, thereby dramatically improving efficiency. Combining all these technologies helps explain the revolutionary impact of the Age of Synergy. Railroads allowed the cheap transportation of materials and products, which led to the formation of factories that produced a multitude of goods. Electricity enabled factories to become more efficient and for cities to expand, supported by communication networks and cars that were increasingly mass-produced, making transportation over great distances even cheaper. So let's understand all this manufacturing from the perspective of geography. When it comes to production, the decision of where to locate your factory or firm can all but determine if you will succeed or fail. Now, with primary industries, the location decision is very simple. You need to position yourself directly by the raw materials. For example, you can only fish in the water, and you can only cut down trees by the forests. However, secondary industries are less dependent on the distance between factories and resource nodes. It certainly doesn't mean that location isn't important at all, but a plethora of factors must be considered, such as the cost of transporting raw materials compared with the cost of transporting finished goods, as well as the proximity of population centers. The kind of manufacturing that dominated after the Second Industrial Revolution and the World Wars is known as Fordism, obviously named after Henry Ford. He didn't invent the mass production process, although he was the first to apply it to the production of automobiles. Many inventions are named after what is readily known, which is why they were initially called horseless carriages, which were eventually shortened to cars. You can see here a Model T Ford priced in 1926 at $520. Considering the average income in the US at that time was around $1,500, the relative price of most vehicles hasn't changed a great deal since the introduction of mass production. The key attribute of Fordist production, more than anything else, has to do with manufacturing at a single site. Corporations would agglomerate factories, warehouses, and other supporting facilities, such as docks and power plants, at a primary location in order to maximize self-sufficiency. What you see here is the Ford River Rouge Industrial Complex in the 1940s, located near Detroit, Michigan. At that time, the single greatest cost for production was transportation of raw materials as well as finished goods. By agglomerating the structures necessary for manufacturing at a single site, costs associated with the friction of distance and distance decay were greatly reduced, thereby increasing efficiency as well as corporate profits. During this era, businesses grew in power like seldom seen before. One way they managed this was through vertical integration, or expanding into different areas along the same production path. Through vertical integration, you own the different levels of production of a good, so you don't have to pay an intermediary, who would obviously charge extra. The reduction in costs leads to greater profit. Andrew Carnegie's company adopted and adapted the Bessemer process for steelmaking. He also owned coal and iron mines, railroads, steel mills, and factories. By the 1880s, largely due to vertical integration, Carnegie Steel was the world's largest manufacturer of steel by a wide margin. Another process corporations employ is horizontal integration, which occurs when a firm takes over or merges with another firm which is in the same industry and stage of production. This is often known as a buyout. The goal of horizontal integration is to consolidate enough similar companies to control more of the market share and reduce competition. This was expertly and sometimes ruthlessly carried out by Standard Oil, established in 1870 by John D. Rockefeller. It was a predominantly American company that produced, transported, refined, and marketed petroleum. Rockefeller frequently bought out and forced out competitors. Over time, he controlled virtually the entire oil industry, establishing a monopoly or trust, in which no other company imparts any significant competition. Standard Oil maintained this control until it was finally broken up by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1911. The Second Industrial Revolution steamed ahead and powered the world into the modern era of production, urbanization, and transportation. And this period would continue until the time of World War I, the Great Depression, and World War II. Afterward, the Fordist era emerged, leading us closer to the current state of our world today.
You're crazy, man. You're crazy. I like you, but you're crazy.